still so many unknowns around this virus.
Not only will America dig itself out of this hole they put us in, we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. I'm Bob Costa, a national political reporter here at the Washington Post. We're continuing our coverage of this virtual Democratic National Convention. This afternoon, I'm going to speak with two people. First, former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who ran for president earlier this year. He jumped from obscurity into contention with a strong showing in Iowa and other states. And then later I'll speak with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. But first, Mayor Buttigieg, welcome back to Washington Post Live.
Thank you. Great to be back with you.
Are you in South Bend?
I am. Yeah, South Bend's perfect this time of year, as you know from your time spent at Notre Dame. Obviously wish that we were in Milwaukee. I thought it was a great decision to host the convention in the Midwest, but this will have to do. And so far I feel like it's been pretty impressive how everybody's adapted to this virtual reality.
We're all adapting, all doing our best. Let's move a little bit around, Mayor, in the Midwest to Iowa. I was struck yesterday by Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez saying that by 2024, he'd like to see the entire presidential process, the nominating contest, move to primaries. Do you believe that because of what happened with Iowa and you this year, that the caucuses should be no more?
Well, obviously, the experience with the Iowa caucus was very frustrating, the amount of time that it took to get the results. I will say there is something to be said for that process where people, get in front of their friends and their neighbors and, literally go into the corner of their candidate. But I don't know that the caucus process has a future unless we can ensure that it is as inclusive and as free of complications as the primary process. There are a lot of different ways to do this, and I don't want to prejudge what's possible. I do think we've learned that whatever we do going into 2024 is going to have to be a little different than what we've done up until now.
But Mayor, that app that went haywire in Iowa, wouldn't a primary process be cleaner or not?
Yeah, one of the advantages of a primary process is that it's more straightforward. That being said, look, we've got a lot of issues around the way that our nominating and election processes work, from the way the districts are drawn to the simple fact that Election Day is not a holiday in this country. There are so many things that right now make it more difficult than it should be for us to have smooth, efficient elections. And we really need to take a look at the condition of our democracy itself, especially when one party has decided that its political strategy hinges in part on making it harder for people to vote. There's a lot to that, and it's never sexy, these process issues, but each passing year we see more and more, I think, the strain that it's putting on our self-image as the world's leading democracy. So long as we leave these issues unresolved, the American people want it, and I think the time has come for deep reform in every part of the process.
Mayor, to that point, you've spent a lot of time on your campaign talking about democratic reforms, overhauling the system. Do you believe Vice President Biden is going to pursue any of that? Have you spoken to him about making fundamental reforms to the Supreme Court, the Electoral College?
One thing I was really gratified by was that the Democratic platform this year includes language about the importance of reforms to the courts to depoliticize them, something I thought it was very important to talk about on the campaign trail, and an idea that I think we've helped to popularize. I also continue to believe that the Electoral College needs reform. I'm not sure where that will sit in terms of the many priorities that will be on the president's desk as we hope, a Biden-Harris administration. But we also know that actually the most efficient way to restore the American people over the Electoral College as those who get to choose the president is actually through an interstate compact. Many states have already signed on to it. If a few more states do, basically state legislation, one state at a time, committing that they will give their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. It's a way to get that done sooner than the process of a constitutional amendment, which is the way to make it happen permanently. Bottom line, this ought to be a country where everyone's vote counts the same, and where the American people can't be overruled in our choice of a president. I remember being a high schooler thinking, learning about the Electoral College, thinking, well, that's a odd historical artifact. I'm sure the first time it actually overrules the American people in my lifetime, it'll never be seen again. That's now happened twice in my lifetime, and it's impacted our country in really serious and negative ways.
Mayor, if you wanted to reform the Iowa caucuses or reform the government, you could do that, especially the caucus part, by being chairman of the Democratic National Committee. In fact, you first came on my radar as both the mayor of South Bend and as someone who was running for a Democratic National Committee chairman. Are you considering doing that again?
Not right now. I decided to run for DNC chair because in December of 2016, January 2017, I noticed certain things that I thought needed to change in our party. I felt that we needed to do a better job of connecting with the Midwest and with my part of the country. I thought we needed to do a better job of connecting with the new generation. I thought we needed to do more around technology. I felt that it was important for us to reach out in some of the more conservative areas that we hadn't, but where I thought that we could make gains and win. And in all of those areas, under the leadership of Tom Perez, we've seen a lot of that growth and a lot of that improvement. And I think the needs of the DNC in 2021 are going to be still many and still going to need a lot of work, but very different than the combination of circumstances almost 4 years ago that made me look around and think, maybe I have the right combination of traits to bring that change. It's why I competed. We had the election. In the end, Tom Perez won, and I'm really grateful for the work that he and the team are doing, especially in making sure that we update the party to the times. What we could not have imagined, any of us then, was that the stakes would be even higher in the 2020 election than we thought, and that, talk about innovation, the party would be compelled to figure out how to do its entire convention on terms not imagined until a few months ago. And I'm pretty sure that some of the things we've seen in the way the convention is going right now are going to stay with us. I don't think, I certainly hope that the pandemic would be a distant memory by 2024, but something tells me the convention then is not going to look like it did in 2016.
Do you think when people in northern Indiana turn on television at night, on Monday night or tonight, or on Thursday night when you speak and they see this specific lineup, do they see a party that's speaking to them?
Yeah, I mean, here's what we saw last night. We saw voices from cities and from rural areas. We saw Americans going through everyday life, Republicans, former Republicans and current Republicans, progressives like Bernie Sanders, and of course, Michelle Obama, somebody who is well regarded across party lines, all pointing in the same direction. And that's the kind of message that I think is going to be really important in order to reach places like the part of the country where I live that haven't always felt like the Democratic Party was speaking to us. What I think came across loud and clear last night, and I think will continue to be a theme throughout this week, is that you don't have to be a diehard Democrat to understand that this country is headed in the wrong direction, that we need change, and we need change as quickly as possible.
But what else needs to be done to reach out to those so-called future former Republicans, to use your phrase from earlier this year? Having former Governor Kasich and former Governor Whitman, that goes so far, perhaps. But what else to reach out to Republicans needs to be done in your view?
Well, I continue to think it has to be at the level of values. Some people are conservative because they really care about national security. And maybe there was a time when they felt that meant they ought to vote Republican. But today, when the President of the United States hears about bounties on the heads of American soldiers and does nothing about it, when he's more likely to trust Russia than he is to trust our own U.S. intelligence community, including people who put their lives on the line in order to get him good information, when the President himself avoided serving, and when our national security is becoming more and more endangered by the day, I think those very same things that might have motivated somebody before to be a Republican now point in a different direction. If you're a conservative because you're a person of faith and you hear as you're sitting in the pews scripture that is about taking care of the vulnerable, or just as a matter of personal conduct, that we ought to seek leaders who walk in the way of humility and decency, and you see what the Republican Party today has become, you may realize that it is no longer the home that you thought it was as a voter of faith. if you're a conservative because you believe in fiscal responsibility, you certainly do not have a home in the current Republican Party, the way that they've run things, even before we got to the pandemic, which of course has forced a different level of spending and investment in order to stay ahead of economic catastrophe. My point is, on issue after issue, I think we're at a moment like we haven't seen in generations for people to cross party lines, not just in this particular election, but perhaps a new realignment as more and more Americans come to see that the values and the interests that are at stake are better served by different leadership than what this Republican Party has to offer.
You spent some time on the campaign trail with former President Jimmy Carter. He's going to speak tonight at the convention. He also reached out to religious voters, evangelicals, particularly in his first race in 1976. Can Democrats peel away any of those voters from the Trump-Pence coalition, and how do they do that?
Well, I think part of it is, and I'm sure we'll see this from President Carter because it's characteristic. You can feel it when you're near him, and you can see it whenever he speaks, is that moral call. Look, I think often we're policy people. We, as Democrats, often think and talk in policy terms, which is fine. But it's important for us to talk about the moral stakes behind those policies, especially at a moment like this. And I think what we've seen, Reverend Barber, who I really admire, who's leading the helping to lead the Poor People's Campaign, has put it this way. We're hearing from Republicans so much about what God says so little and so little about what God says so much. There's a chance for a different way to connect with folks. We may not reach everybody, and there's a diversity of opinion among the faithful in this country, just as there's a diversity of opinion within the big tent of the Democratic Party. But what I know is that there's a moment as never before to reach out to people who I know are questioning whether the kind of conduct, personal and political, that they see out of this president is in any way consistent with a Christian tradition or, frankly, any faith tradition that I've ever heard of.
And Vice President Pence is someone you know well from Indiana politics. You got noticed early on in the campaign for drawing a response from Vice President Pence. Usually he doesn't do that sort of thing by getting in a political back and forth with a Democratic presidential candidate. Because of all that experience, Mayor, whether it's formal or informal, are you going to be involved in talking to Senator Harris as she gets ready for that debate with Vice President Pence?
Well, I've gotten to know Senator Harris well. First, of course, when we were competing, and then since then as friends. And of course, I'll do everything that I can, officially or unofficially, to be helpful. That being said, I don't think she needs a lot of coaching from somebody like me. She has demonstrated, not just in debates, but certainly in the Senate, in some really remarkable moments in committee hearings, that she understands how to puncture hypocrisy, how to get to the core of an issue, and she won't allow people to get away with contradictions the way that Mike Pence has, frankly, very much tried to get away with ever since he signed on and lent his credibility in the conservative movement to this president. I mean, for the vice president to continue to maintain that, I mean, even if you just leave aside the policy, for him to continue to maintain that a person who got caught sending hush money to a porn star ought to be the moral as well as the political leader of the United States of America. That is something that has to be called out. And I know that Senator Harris is somebody who will not let him get off the hook when it comes to the facts and when it comes to the values behind the facts.
But stick with this for a second, Mayor, because you've observed Vice President Pence as a governor, as vice president. You've thought about him and how he operates politically. What's an insight you could offer to Senator Harris about him, about certain kinds of things that she could attack in a debate setting?
Well, one thing I personally believe to be true, just because I know him, is that deep down he knows that this is wrong. I think deep down he knows that he's part of something wrong. And I think that she ought to, frankly, bring that out when this campaign proceeds to the point that she's in a position to debate him. You can also look at just what has happened on this ticket and what's happened in this administration. The governor, when he was governor, had a mixed record when it came to competence here in the state. In fact, one of the worst moments on his watch was an epidemic. There was an HIV outbreak in southern Indiana, and he took a very long time before authorizing the steps that were needed in a very low-income rural area to intervene and to stop that from spreading and harming more people. There is a through line, I think, from that show of incompetence to what's happening now as the Trump-Pence administration has allowed America to become the worst in the developed world at handling this pandemic with lives on the line. And I think that's really important territory to cover and to discuss. But just as importantly, frankly, I've got very strong feelings about the failed leadership of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. But this isn't just about them. Look, from a Democratic perspective or an American perspective, I think what we're up against ought to be motivation enough. But this isn't just about what we're against. It's about what we're for. You see in Joe Biden somebody whose instinct is to heal and not to divide, somebody whose desire is to bring Americans together. And in Kamala Harris, somebody whose very presence on the ticket and whose presence in the vice presidency is historic and really enacts America's best quality, which is that our country at its best is one that can expand in terms of inclusion and belonging and empowerment. It's got a long way to go, but it's a big step forward even for her to take this historic place on the ticket. These are just some of the things we can look forward to, in addition to actual policies that are going to raise wages and get more Americans access to health care and child care, beat back this virus, get ahead of climate, make our communities safer. We've got a lot to look forward to, not just a lot that we've got to change and bring an end to in this period of chaos and division that is life in the Trump era.
Mayor, some people may not know about it, but there was a few stories about your upcoming book. You're writing a book about trust, and that's a big theme: trust in American politics, in American life, trust in institutions and leaders. And I know, Mayor, you probably have a long list of areas where you believe Republicans have eroded trust. But this is the week of your party's convention. What's one area you believe Democrats need to do a better job in terms of the public trust?
Well, I think that regardless of which party you're in, we've got to do a better job of making sure that people feel that they can trust American institutions. That means making sure that, again, our democracy is in better shape. Look, the truth is, historically, things like gerrymandering have been a bipartisan sin, although now it's really Democrats who talk about improving them. As long as that goes on, it erodes trust that votes count. I think there is a serious deficit in certainly trust for voters of color, black voters who trust the Democratic Party more than the Republican Party, but have been given a lot of reasons to be skeptical of the political system as a whole. And just because our party has so much more support among voters of color doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of work to do there in building trust. We've also got to make sure that we are establishing a sense of a shared field of fact. We may have different values, we may have different interests, but if we're not in the same reality, then we're not even having a debate. We're all just, as Americans, talking past each other. That gets harder and harder to cope with the patterns of social media and the way information moves around right now. We've got to address that so that people simply trust what they see, trust the basics of information. This is going to be really important for beating back the pandemic, where, for example, right now, a shockingly high proportion of Americans have such little trust in institutions that they have expressed doubt on whether they'd even get a vaccine when a vaccine is developed. But there are also tons of parallels between what's going on right now with the pandemic and what's upon us or is about to be upon us when it comes to climate change. We've got to put a lot of intentional work on building up forms of trust, social and political, so that we can navigate these issues together, even or especially when we have disagreements about exactly what to do.
On that point about vaccines, do you think Vice President Biden in the final 80 or so days of this campaign should be talking more about vaccines and trusting what comes out of that process in the coming year?
Well, I do think that everybody in a position of visibility has a responsibility to reassure Americans about the importance of getting vaccines. When they developed a vaccine for, I believe it was polio, it took some work to get people to really believe that that was something that they should take advantage of. They enlisted Elvis to get a vaccine on television. It was televised, and it had a huge impact. Even around here in South Bend, I'm obviously no Elvis, but when flu shot season came around, I would sometimes encourage local TV crews to come along while I got my flu jab, just to remind everybody that it was safe and easy and effective. I think that that's something that should be non-political, bipartisan, and that figures of visibility, especially those who can speak to communities that have been given reason not to trust American institutions or even the American medical establishment, if you go back into history. We need figures from not just politics, but the academy, sports, entertainment, really anybody who has an audience, to talk about the importance of getting this vaccine once it exists in a safe and effective fashion. Because so much depends on making sure that we build up that kind of immunity as a country. But I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. Look, the vaccine, we hope, is on its way. In the meantime, we just got to make sure there's more testing, that more people are prepared to get tested, and of course, that more testing is available, something the states are increasingly stepping up to try to arrange, since the federal government under President Trump just couldn't get it done.
Mayor Buttigieg, in the final few minutes here, talk a little politics. One question I've wanted to ask you for many months is, do you regret your decision to get out when you did of this presidential race? Because as a reporter, I wondered at the time, is he closing up shop? Maybe this could be a 2 or 3 person race, you versus Biden and Sanders, you versus Sanders. Do you ever look back and say, maybe I got out too soon?
No, look, it's a tough decision to make, to get out. You spend so much time, so much effort, every waking minute driving toward one goal. But there came a point where I sat down with the team, we looked at the numbers, and not only was it clear that the path was impossibly steep, but I also came to feel that if I did stay in, and of course there's that part of you that's, look, my very existence in the race defied all odds. So there's a part of you that says, look, that sliver of probability ought to be something I chase after, and maybe it really will come true, just as my campaign up to this point has beaten the odds time and time again. But I also understood that each day I stayed in the race had an effect as well. It could have an effect on party unity. It could have an effect on our opportunity to come together and build the coalition that was going to defeat Donald Trump. I got into this race for very specific reasons. I didn't seek the office of the presidency because I wanted to have it. I sought this office because I believed that I could serve to bring the party together and to defeat Donald Trump and to help unify the country. And those very same motivations that propelled me to get into the race, at a certain point, I realized the best way I could stay true to those goals was actually to get out of the race and then to back Joe Biden. And I haven't regretted that for a second.
Mayor, you often have a sunny way of talking about your campaign, but you just mentioned you were the first openly gay major presidential candidate to run for president. Was there a dark side to that experience, threats or unease as a candidate as you went about your business of being a politician?
Sure, there was. There were disruptions at our events, especially early on. I can handle somebody protesting or disrupting an event because they don't agree with a position that I've taken. But for somebody to do that just because they don't like that I exist, that's something that is pretty difficult to face. But I got to tell you, that was very much the minority. There were so many times and so many places and so many unlikely places where I found that people were either supportive, very supportive and specifically supportive of the historic nature of our campaign, or they made it clear that they didn't care. They just wanted to know if I had a good plan on mental health or dealing with the need to empower workers and raise wages or whatever else was affecting that individual and their family's life the most. And so, of course, there were challenges that came with that fact about our campaign. But I was also so moved by the encounters that I was able to have, sometimes with people my parents' age who never thought they would live to see a gay candidate for president taken seriously, and sometimes young people not even yet old enough to vote, who I think, or I would like to think, or who told me that something about our campaign let them know that they really do belong here.
Mayor, you've said you would be honored to serve in a Biden administration. Of course, that's a long ways away, in a sense, not that long. and you've been pretty coy about what you would do. But people are curious, Mayor, about where your head is at. And you were a naval intelligence officer in Afghanistan. If asked, are you willing and ready to serve as Secretary of Defense?
I'm not going to measure drapes for one job or another because the most important thing, and this is exactly where my head is at, is to make sure that Joe Biden wins and that there is a Biden administration. Once there is, I'll do everything in my power to support that. And if that's from within with a return to public service, that's something I'd love a chance to do. If that's from the outside in some other capacity, then that's what I'll do. But we'll have plenty of time to think about things like that once we accomplish this mission that has to be the laser focus of every Democrat. That is to defeat Donald Trump, to bring together progressives, moderates, independents, and a lot of Republicans who are ready to make a change, and to make sure that we elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because we get exactly one shot to do this.
But you've been a consultant, an executive, a mayor. You understand, as you said, your own traits. Do you believe you'd be probably best served doing something such as Secretary of Defense, ambassador to the United Nations, working on housing and urban development? Where do you think your traits could best be served for this country if there is a Biden administration?
So we elect a president to make those kinds of decisions. My job is to make sure we elect the right one.
I expected you were going to be coy about this, Mayor, but I wanted to just try to prod a little bit. But for now, are you still based in South Bend politically and personally for the time being?
Absolutely, yeah. This is home. My mom lives around the corner, and I've been thankful during the pandemic that Chas and I have been able to visit her and spend time with her. I don't know who's going to break it to the dogs that this arrangement of us being home all the time is not permanent. But I got to tell you, when you go a year and a half on the road all the time, sometimes lucky to be at home 2 nights in a row. Sometimes lucky to be in the same hotel room out on the road 2 nights in a row. Just the simple fact of being reconnected with home is a real blessing amid obviously a terrible circumstance. But counting our blessings right now, and yes, this is very much home.
And final question here, Mayor. You're speaking on Thursday night. That's the marquee night, the big night right ahead of the nomination, the acceptance speech for Vice President Biden. Give us in a sentence or two the big takeaway from your speech.
Well, the biggest thing I want to speak to is that our country's at its best when it makes room for everybody, when it expands the sense of belonging. That is such an important part of what any of us need in order to get by. And our country has not always lived up to that promise. But America's promise, which is the theme on Thursday night, is that it can make it possible for everybody to belong. I see that in the future of a Biden-Harris administration, and I'm going to share that vision with Americans, and proud to be a part of just such an extraordinary set of people speaking that night and throughout the course of this week.
Mayor Buttigieg, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time, and we hope you come back to Washington Post Live at some point.
Look forward to it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mayor. And if you're watching this stream, I hope you stay tuned for just a couple minutes from now. Very soon, I'll be joined by Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Not too long of a break. I'm Bob Costa. If you're just tuning in, national political reporter with the Washington Post. We are continuing our coverage of the Democratic National Convention, this virtual convention, and we're going to turn now to another rising Midwestern Democrat, Michigan's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Governor Whitmer, good to chat with you again.
Good to be with you again. Before we get started, I want to suggest that your graphics people look at Michigan on your map. I want to make sure it's, well defined with both of our peninsulas.
That's true. I mean, those people in the Northern Peninsula, they get of all people who would know how they feel when they get ignored, you would know.
I mean, I never display the map of Michigan without both hands, so.
Both hands. Let's start there, Governor. I was talking to some veteran political operatives today, and I told them about this conversation, and they said, ask Governor Whitmer if this convention, especially the Monday night program with Senator Sanders, does it play up north? Does it play up north in Saginaw County in Macomb County. What's your gut on that?
I do. I think so. I think that there were some powerful moments from last night. And I think of the young woman who talked about her father who passed from COVID-19. And that's a story that it's an example of, I think, many stories that are playing out across this country. People want to know that we've got leadership that can tackle the pandemic, get it under control, save lives, and build our economy back so that it is stronger than ever. And that's not been done. No one blames this virus on Donald Trump, but the response to it is his administration and decisions that came directly from the White House. We have 170,000 people who have died, millions out of work, and yet there's still months into this, not even a real plan for testing or for a nationwide mask mandate. These are simple things that we're all counting on to get it right. And I think those stories from last night will resonate with Michiganders everywhere.
Governor, when we first spoke at Washington Post Live months ago at the beginning of this pandemic, you drew national notice for having tough measures as you tried to confront the spread of the virus. Now in August, as you've been dealing with this crisis, what do you know now about the virus and about the spread that you didn't know then?
I think we as mankind has learned a lot about this virus. I mean, that's the nature of a novel virus, right? We've never seen anything like this before. And so we've got to listen to our epidemiologists and our public health experts. We've got to make decisions based on the best science and information that we can get our hands on. And we got to talk to one another in that process. One of the things for which I'm most grateful is that I've built some wonderful relationships with my fellow governors on both sides of the aisle, whether it's J.B. Pritzker in Illinois or Mike DeWine in Ohio. We've got a great midwestern group of governors who talk regularly, who share information, and we each benefit from that. We're all trying to build a plane as we fly it and grappling with a lot of the same worries. When we take kids out of school, how do we feed the children who get 2 meals a day because they're at risk? How do we ensure that we are capable of meeting the needs of our people if they are unemployed, and how do we keep them in their homes? And so this has been, I think, a moment where I'm so grateful that I've got these relationships, but also that we've got phenomenal experts like the University of Michigan School of Public Health and my chief medical executive, Dr. Janae Caldoun, who's helped inform every decision we've made.
Speaking of relationships, Governor, it is campaign season, but governing at all levels must go on. When is the last time you had a personal discussion with Vice President Pence or President Trump about coronavirus pandemic issues?
I haven't had a one-on-one in a bit, but I was on a call just today with the nation's governors and the vice president to get an update on their coronavirus response. So I do these calls. I'm on the executive board of the National Governors Association, and I participate in all of the calls. And we had Dr. Birx gave us some updates today as well. So we do stay in regular communication. I will say that FEMA has a seat in our State Emergency Operations Center, not literally because we're not all getting together, but figuratively. And so we've really embedded different members from the federal government into our State Operations Center. And I think that's been really important and helpful.
What about on the Postal Service front? Is there anything you can do as governor to monitor what's going on and to counter what's going on at the federal level in terms of mail and mail-in voting?
Yeah, so a few things. First of all, in 2018, I was really pleased to be elected, but also that the voters of my state and their wisdom elected Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Attorney General Dana Nessel. These are fierce advocates for voting, for integrity. So we have initiated suit against the federal government. We've joined a number of other states. Our Attorney General is leading that effort. Our Secretary of State is leading the effort to ensure that we've got drop boxes so that people can safely vote from home, but also ensure that their ballot gets in time in the event that the USPS has been seriously undermined. And so we are working on both fronts because we want to make sure every ballot gets counted, and that regardless of what side of the aisle someone sits on, they should be able to safely vote from home in the midst of a pandemic. We need to be able to do both.
How big of a climb is it, Governor, for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris in those counties I mentioned, Saginaw, Macomb, or places like that in Michigan, suburban areas or areas that went for President Trump in 2016?
So, just as a little perspective, in 2016, President Trump won Michigan by less than 11,000 votes. Just 2 years later, when I ran for governor, I won by about 400,000 votes. And so we've really built up an organization here. That being said, and while I flipped, I think 9 counties that President Trump had won just 2 years before, all that being said, when you see polls that have Michigan in a double digit difference, I don't buy it for a second. Michiganders will start to make their decisions after these conventions, after Labor Day. The numbers are going to definitely tighten up, and I don't think anyone should take Michigan for granted. And that's why I think Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's economic plan to make sure that we are able to get people back to work, that we buy American, that we are focused on upskilling and leveling the playing field so hardworking American jobs are valued and valuable. You can make a good living doing them. I think that there's a lot of work in his economic plan that is going to resonate with Michigan voters, and people want to know about the economy. How do we get it up and running? How do we make it sustainable? And most of all, how do we ensure that it inures to the benefit of the hardworking men and women who are trying to feed their families and make sure their kids have a better opportunity than they have?
So the tricky thing here in the final stretch of this campaign is candidate travel. And there's no doubt the Biden campaign wants to win Michigan, but you know it as well as anyone. You're the governor, you won by a huge margin, as you said. Is it going to be necessary for Vice President Biden or Senator Harris to physically put feet on the ground in Michigan between now and November to have a chance at that state?
We have a good organization on the ground. So we built it up from scratch in 2018 and we've kept it going. And I'm proud of the team that we have. I do not know if in the midst of a pandemic, if the former vice president or Senator Harris are going to be able to physically get to states. I just don't know. And frankly, I don't recommend it. We know that this virus is still very present all across Michigan as it is all across the country. We have got strict rules about congregation and people coming together. And I want the vice president to stay healthy and not put himself in jeopardy. And I want to keep the citizens of my state safe. And so I think that we're going to have to be creative about how we stay connected. I know he loves people. He loves coming to Michigan. We've spent a lot of time together in diners, et cetera. And I talked to Senator Harris this weekend. She's very focused on Michigan as well. But we'll see kind of what the lay of the land looks like. But in the meantime, we are organizing. We do have an army that is ready to work and is continuing to do that work. And we're just going to keep at
it. Governor, when you look at the convention schedule for tonight, some former presidents, Mayor Buttigieg and I were talking about President Carter. He's going to make some remarks. Also, former President Bill Clinton will be speaking at the convention. You know what plays in the suburbs and swing states and battlegrounds. To have President Clinton give a speech tonight, however brief, good idea or bad idea?
I think it's a good idea. I really do. When President Clinton was president, we had incredible economic growth. People had jobs that paid well, that they could raise their families on. I think he's, is a compelling orator and has a gift for connecting with people. And so I do think it's a good idea. I'm really looking forward to President Carter speaking as well. I think that he is post-presidency has done so much for this country and has continued to serve our people. And I think he's such an inspiration.
I was asking Mayor Buttigieg about his future. I read, Governor, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would prefer to stay in Michigan if Vice President Biden wins the White House. How hard is your line on that? Would you really turn down a chance to be in the cabinet?
You know what? I'll have that conversation with Joe Biden if and when he wants to. But here's the thing. I love being the governor of Michigan. I worked for 2 years to earn this opportunity. And even on the hardest days, I'm really glad to be here because I know that the decisions we've made have saved people's lives and put Michigan in a much stronger position than a lot of states are in right now because of this pandemic. I have 3 generations of my family. I've never sought an office that would take me away from Michigan or to Washington, D.C. That being said, I know never say never. So we'll just have to have a conversation if and when he ever wants to have it. But like I said, would like him in the White House, so I've got a close friend and ally in DC, so I can do more on behalf of the people of Michigan.
Did the whole vetting process for vice president, having to hand over financial information, sit for all these interviews, was probably some people and lawyers you didn't know? Did it leave a sour taste in your mouth, or did it give you? Did you leave it with a positive attitude?
Oh, I left it with a positive attitude. I found everyone to be incredibly delightful and professional. It's not a fun thing to go through, but by the same token, it was an honor to be asked. And frankly, I told the vice president, my greatest hope is that he's got a partner that he feels good about that is going to help him get his agenda accomplished. The fact that he chose Kamala Harris, I think, is a wonderful thing. I am really excited about it, and I can stay here in my home state and do what I need to do for the people of Michigan. So that's a good outcome from my perspective, and my whole family was happy too.
What did you think when you saw that your plane travel, you're trying to take a quiet flight to visit the vice president, it became a news story? What was that like?
I've been gotten more comfortable with the heightened scrutiny that comes with the office of governor, but that was a whole new level. So that was a bit of an eye opener.
Final thing here, Governor. I know your time's brief with us today. Hope you come back sometime soon. But when you're sitting there with Vice President Biden, you had a real opportunity to have a one-on-one with him in depth. Many Americans don't have that opportunity. He will have a chance to speak to them this week at the convention. But what did you learn about VP Biden in that one-on-one conversation? Something that maybe we don't know about him.
I don't know if I've learned anything that we don't know about him. I can tell you this. He is genuine and he cares about people. One of the things that over the course of this pandemic is he is called to check in long before he asked me to go through this process and throughout the process to check in. How are things going on the ground? What do you need? What are you seeing? If the federal government was doing everything you needed them to do, what would that look like? And I know he cares. I know he cares about people all across this country. And I think that ease with which we can get right down to business and develop a cadence where we're really sharing information and getting down to brass tacks is something that is incredibly endearing, but also gives me great confidence that he is the man for this job in this moment. And you think of all the talented people on that stage at the beginning of this process, and that it's Joe Biden right now. I think he can walk in on day one and do a lot of things that are going to improve the quality of life and America's standing in the world. And that's why I'm so excited to support him and Kamala Harris.
Governor Whitmer, we appreciate it. If he wins and you join that cabinet, we want that scoop at the Washington Post. Remember that. All right.
You got it.
All right. Governor Whitmer, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us for these conversations with Mayor Buttigieg. It just felt like yesterday he was at the Washington Post newsroom. I haven't been back there in a long time. And Governor Whitmer during the beginning of this pandemic. Now here we are in the heart of the campaign season, August 2020, economic crisis, health crisis, and a political convention this week and next week. Washington Post Live is going to keep tracking all of this. We're going to have Jonathan Capehart here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. To have this reporters and columnists to analyze everything that's going on with the convention. They've been doing a terrific job so far. Then at noon, former presidential candidate Andrew Yang will be back with us at Washington Post Live. And New Mexico's governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, will be here. And on Thursday, that big night, the night of the speech for VP Biden, we'll close out our coverage with Senator Bernie Sanders. I'll talk to him for half an hour. And Speaker Nancy Pelosi will be here with Karen Tumulty. It'll be a busy week for all of us here at Post Live and for the country. But for now, stay well, and thanks for joining us.